Nas has always been one of those artists who lets the music speak for itself. For years, he avoided interviews that dug too deep, especially when it came to his old feud with Jay-Z. As the years went by, things started to shift. Both Nas and Jay-Z got older. The anger was gone. Still, there was always a sense that something hadn't been said. There were questions fans still wanted answered. What really happened between them? How deep did the wounds go? And more importantly, what did Nas really think of Jay-Z after all these years? Now, with 50 years of life behind him, Nas has finally chosen to speak. To truly understand the legendary battle between Nas and Jay-Z, we have to rewind to New York City in the late 1990s. This was a time when hip-hop was still reeling from a massive loss. The notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie Smalls, had been murdered, leaving a huge hole in the heart of the culture. Biggie wasn't just another rapper, but the king of New York. His death left behind a vacant throne, and the entire hip-hop world wanted to know who would rise to take his place. There were two artists who stood out as the top contenders. One was Nas, a gifted storyteller from Queensbridge whose debut album, Illmatic, was already being praised as one of the greatest in rap history. He was quiet, poetic, and deeply respected for his lyricism. On the other side was Jay-Z, the smooth-talking hustler from Brooklyn who brought sharp wit and business savvy to the mic. He was rising fast, turning heads with his wordplay and his confidence. Both were from New York, both were gifted, and both had their eyes on the same prize, the crown that Biggie had left behind. At first, the tension between Nas and Jay-Z was quiet and subtle. In 1996, Jay-Z released his debut album, Reasonable Doubt, and initially wanted Nas to record a verse for the song Bring It On. However, Nas never showed up to the studio session, which reportedly disappointed Jay-Z and his team. Later on that same album, a Nas vocal from the World Is Yours Pete Rock remix was sampled on Dead Presidents II. That sample became a central hook in Jay-Z's track, even though Nas declined an offer to re-record the chorus or appear in the music video. From Nas's perspective, being sampled without him actively participating felt like a passive way of undermining his stance, especially after he had refused to collaborate. Fans picked up on that. They interpreted using his voice without permission as a subtle challenge, beyond mere musical collaboration. That moment became a spark. Nas released It Was Written soon after, opening with the line, "Lex with TV sets the minimum," widely seen as a subliminal reference to Jay-Z's lifestyle and lyrics in Reasonable Doubt. Although this early tension didn't explode into a full-blown feud right away, it planted seeds. What began as missed studio sessions and sampled vocals gradually grew into one of hip-hop's most famous rivalries. In the world of rap, artists often throw subliminal disses lines that don't name names, but are clearly meant for a specific person. Fans and insiders quickly noticed that some of Jay-Z's lyrics seemed to poke at Nas. In return, Nas dropped a few lines of his own. These weren't full-on attacks, but they were warning shots. It was like watching two boxers circle each other before the first punch was thrown. The energy was building, the air was getting heavy, but nobody expected what would come next. Everything changed in the summer of 2001. Jay-Z was performing at Hot 97's Summer Jam, one of the biggest and most important concerts in New York City. The stadium was packed, the energy was electric, and all eyes were on him. In the middle of his set, Jay-Z did something no one expected. He dropped a brand new track right there on stage. The song was Takeover, and it wasn't just another verse or freestyle. It was a full-on attack. For the first time, Jay-Z called out Nas by name, going straight for the heart of his legacy. He questioned Nas's status in hip-hop, criticized his recent work, and claimed that he had already lost his edge. But Jay didn't stop with just words. Behind him, a giant screen lit up with an image mocking Prodigy from Mobb Deep, an artist closely tied to Nas. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't just a diss track, but a declaration of war. Jay-Z had gone public and made it personal. Later on, record producer Irv Gotti explained the reason behind it. According to him, Jay-Z felt like people were starting to forget who the king of New York really was.
Jay's a bastard.
Alright.
He wants to be number one.
Alright.
So he gonna pick a fight or whatever because he wants.
Suddenly, all eyes were on Nas. People waited, debated, speculated. Jay-Z had thrown the first punch in the open, and it was a hard one. Some believed Nas was finished, that takeover had done too much damage, that the quiet poet from Queens wouldn't have the firepower to respond. Every radio station, every magazine, every hip-hop conversation revolved around one question: what would Nas do? Weeks passed. The tension only grew. Then, finally, Nas answered. He released a track called Ether, and it wasn't just a response, it was a full-blown counterstrike. Nas didn't hold back. He didn't dodge. He went after Jay-Z with everything he had. He tore into Jay's image, his past, his reputation, even his looks.
Ether the whole right? Jay-Z.
The song was raw, emotional, and venomous. This wasn't just about defending his name, but about reclaiming his place at the top. Ether hit like a thunderclap. Fans were stunned. Radio stations played it non-stop. Hip-hop heads debated the lyrics line by line, and slowly, the public opinion shifted. People started saying it. Nas had won. The word ether took on a new meaning. It became slang for when someone gets completely destroyed in an argument or battle. That's how powerful the song was. That's how deeply it landed. Nas had flipped the script. The man many thought was on the decline had pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in hip-hop history. And Jay-Z, for all his confidence and success, now found himself on the defensive. After the fiery clash between Ether and Takeover, the open shots came to a halt, but peace didn't follow right away. The music had quieted, but the battle lines had already been drawn, and fans didn't forget. You were either with Nas or you were with Jay-Z. There was no middle ground. In barbershops, college dorms, radio shows, and street corners across the country, people debated endlessly about who had really won. For years, both rappers ruled their own lanes, each holding onto their fan base and their pride. The feud was no longer front-page news, but it still pulsed in the background, like an unresolved chapter waiting for a final sentence. Then, in 2005, something completely unexpected happened. Jay-Z announced a concert titled I Declare War. With a name like that, fans and critics assumed he was preparing to fire off new lyrical shots, maybe even reopen old beefs. The hype was enormous. People showed up expecting fireworks, and Jay-Z gave them just that, but not in the way anyone expected. Midway through the concert, standing in front of a sold-out crowd, Jay-Z shouted out, "Let's go, Esco," calling for Nas by one of his most iconic nicknames. Within seconds, Nas walked out onto the stage. The crowd exploded.
That shit. Let's go, Esco.
For a moment, time froze. Fans who had grown up watching these two battle it out in verses were now witnessing something they never thought possible. Nas and Jay-Z stood side by side. No insults, no tension. Just two hip-hop giants acknowledging one another with a handshake. It was the public end of one of the most intense rivalries in music history. But the story didn't stop there. What came next proved this was more than just a publicity stunt or a one-night moment. Shortly after that powerful reunion, the hip-hop world got another shock. News broke that Nas had signed a deal with Def Jam. That alone would have been big news. But what made it truly historic was the fact that the president of Def Jam at the time was none other than Jay-Z. The same man who once tried to end Nas's career with Takeover was now welcoming him to his label. That handshake on stage, it wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was the beginning of a real partnership. This was no longer a battle over who was the best rapper in New York. It had evolved into something much bigger. They were now grown men with influence, using their power to build instead of destroy. Nas, known for his unmatched lyricism, and Jay-Z, who had transformed from street hustler to music mogul, were choosing collaboration over conflict, and that decision sent a clear message to the entire hip-hop community. Growth was possible, even after the deepest rivalries. Here's what Jay-Z said about their collaboration.
You know what I mean? I didn't sign Nas. I partnered with Nas. I mean, you can't sign up.
Soon, fans got what they had long dreamed of, music from both men on the same track. Their first major collaboration was a song called Black Republican. The title alone carried weight. This wasn't just a song, it was a moment. It was two voices that had once clashed, now rhyming side by side, reflecting on their journeys from poverty and pain to success and influence. They weren't just trading bars, they were reflecting on their evolution. The hunger, the anger, the ego, It was all still there, but it had matured into purpose. Then came another joint effort, a track titled Success, and the message was clear. They weren't competing anymore. They were sharing wisdom. You could hear it in their lyrics. It was no longer about who had the better punchline. It was about who could tell the deeper truth. So, what's the real truth behind the legendary rivalry between Nas and Jay-Z? Now that Nas has reached his 50s and is looking back with the clarity of age and experience, it's not a hidden story waiting to be exposed, and it's definitely not about reigniting old drama. The truth, as Nas has shared through his music and interviews over the years, is something deeper. It's a reflection on growth, competition, and the evolution of two men who once stood on opposite sides of the same stage. The truth comes in layers, and when you take a closer look, it reveals a powerful transformation not just in their relationship, but in how hip-hop itself matured. The first layer of that truth is about how the rivalry, even at its most intense, wasn't born out of hate. It was a form of high-level competition. Nas has said this in multiple interviews, especially in his interview with Rick Rubin, where he looks back at that period with a calm, thoughtful tone. He doesn't speak with bitterness. Instead, he explains that hip-hop was always rooted in battling, and that he was even honored to be in that rivalry with Jay-Z.
I was honored to have that part of my life happen because,
according to Nas, you couldn't be great unless you stood toe-to-toe with the best and proved your skills.
That's how I saw the greats do it coming up. I saw some of the greats do it.
Nas saw it as two elite craftsmen testing each other in public, almost like professional athletes locked in a championship series. Think Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, men who battled fiercely in the ring, but with a respect that ran deeper than the punches. In that same way, Nas viewed the Jay-Z beef as part of the culture's DNA. He wasn't fighting out of spite, he was competing for the crown. Looking back, Nas also shared that moving past the feud, but not ignoring it, helped shape his later work. He's grown into telling stories about fatherhood, love, and culture. Songs like Daughters and others showed a man taking emotional responsibility, not just for his music, but his legacy as a father and a storyteller. Then comes the final and most important truth. The real power was never in the battle itself. The real power came later, when the battle ended, and both men chose to build something bigger together. This is the lesson Nas holds closest today. It's not just something he says, it's something you can see in how he lives, in how he moves, and in what he's built. After years of lyrical warfare, he and Jay-Z became more than friends. They became allies, collaborators, even business partners. They've invested in companies together. They've supported each other's projects. And that evolution, from fierce competition to mutual respect, is something few could have predicted back in the early 2000s. At the same time, Nas and Jay-Z have long since reconciled and even joke about it. On King's Disease III, Nas reflects on how far they've come. He mentions texting Jay, teasing that their beef ain't over, while fondly recalling how they once dissected each other's lines from Takeover and Ether. That lighthearted texting is a sign of emotional distance now, a healing that took years but brought them to shared respect. In his 2022 song Thun, Nas captured this new chapter in a single, unforgettable line. "No beef or rivals, they producing me now." That line says everything. The men who once used verses to tear each other down are now helping each other win. It's no longer about who sits on the throne. It's about building a kingdom strong enough for everyone to thrive. The old war over who deserved to wear the crown of New York is no longer relevant. That fight has been settled, not by one man defeating the other, but by both proving they were destined for greatness. Today, they rule side by side, not as rivals battling for the same title, but as two kings with their own thrones. Each has carved out a legacy so powerful and so unique that there is no need to compare. They are both champions in their own right, showing the world that there are many ways to define success in hip-hop. Let's start with Nas, the lyrical king. While many artists from his generation have slowed down or faded into the background, Nas has done the complete opposite. In what can only be described as a creative renaissance, he teamed up with the producer Hit Boy and delivered a string of remarkable albums. The King's Disease trilogy and the Magic series reminded everyone that Nas's pen is still razor sharp. These weren't just throwback projects aimed at old fans. They were fresh, modern, and full of lyrical depth that resonated with listeners young and old. In 2021, Nas finally won his first Grammy for King's Disease, a moment that felt long overdue. For decades, he had been called one of the greatest to ever touch a microphone. That Grammy didn't define his career, but it gave formal recognition to what hip-hop fans had known all along. Nas is a living legend who continues to evolve. He is now seen as a wise elder of the culture, someone who never stopped sharpening his craft. His music speaks to the past, the present, and the future all at once. Now, turn to Jay-Z, the mogul king. His legacy goes far beyond the studio. While he is still one of the most respected rappers in history, Jay-Z used his success in music as a foundation for something much bigger. He built an empire that changed the way people think about artists in the business world. Jay-Z became hip-hop's first certified billionaire by expanding into areas like fashion, tech, liquor, and sports. His company Roc Nation has become a major force in entertainment, representing artists, athletes, and cultural icons. Brands like Armand de Brignac Champagne and Douce Cognac are just parts of his larger vision. His life is the blueprint for turning talent into lasting wealth. Add to that his role as a husband to Beyoncé and father to their children, and you have a man who has created a dynasty in every sense of the word. Jay-Z's throne represents ambition, strategy, and long-term vision. He didn't just climb the ladder, he built one. When you compare their journeys, you realize that Nas and Jay-Z represent two sides of the same coin. Nas chose to go deeper into his art, proving again and again that lyrical excellence is not just for the young. Jay-Z expanded outward, showing that an artist can grow into a business powerhouse and still remain true to his roots. One path is not better than the other. They are different, yet equally powerful. Together, they show that greatness in hip-hop doesn't have one definition. It can be found in perfecting your voice, or in building an empire, or, if you're lucky, in doing both.